It's Talk Erie and the Joel Natale Show live from our Kingdom Financial Group studio here, and having the eye of the tiger when it comes to commercial real estate. It is Chuck Peters, managing partner of Altair. This is like when you were on the radio. This would have been on the what? Because you were on K104 at one point, right? Or,
well, no.
More Rocket, you know.
Started at Word, like and speaking of, sorry, hold on. Are we live on?
Yeah,
Facebook?
we are live now.
This camera works
go to
over
camera
here?
1 or 2. Actually, it's camera 2.
Yep. Have to start today.
He's showing a picture of me as a wee one.
Look at that.
That's a great picture.
That is a great.
You can see it on Facebook and YouTube. Oh my goodness!
I hope people were live watching that.
That's funny.
Yeah, no, I think I was playing The Cure when I started.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
right,
yeah,
Shaney?
Yeah.
I think it was more like the Affordable Floors and Depeche Mode and The Cure.
Right, not
That
necessarily Survivor.
Yeah, no, that came later when I when I left Word and went to Rocket.
There you go. There you go. But you have been involved in commercial real estate. Gosh, pretty much your whole career, other than radio, right? I mean,
Yeah, for the most part. A little sidestep into technology with AJ at
Right,
ErieNet
that's
for
right.
a few years, and then got into my dad's business, which was real estate. Yeah, so
Did-
been
did
doing
you-
that for 20.
Did
as a
you
matter of fact,
do
Altair's 20th anniversary is November 1st of
Okay.
2025. Yeah.
with your dad? Did you guys do like just had rentals? Like you just kind of manage rentals?
And my dad owned apartments and got into, he was an insurance guy,
Okay,
actually,
yeah.
for the most part, and then decided he wanted, quote, passive income and started buying apartments. And he learned quickly that isn't exactly passive, like there's still work involved.
Right.
And then he got into little post office buildings. So if you drive through, a lot of smaller towns, there are little brick 1,000 square foot post office buildings, and he got into investing in those. And
Did he build them? Some of them?
no, most
Okay.
of them were
They were in
like
existence,
a developer might build it, put the post office in, and then an investor would buy it. And
Wow.
that's back when post office leases were really, really good leases.
Oh, that's
As a matter of fact, a little of that experience helped when we got the post office at 14th and State.
well. I would imagine so. Yeah, I mean, you have the quote main post office, or at least the downtown post office.
Yeah, in the
in
Mercantile
your
building,
in the Mercantile building. Speaking of which, you just landed. Congratulations, a pretty big get with Federal Resources in Mercantile building, right?
Yeah, man, Jeremy and Doug, who run Federal Resources, very committed to Erie, Pennsylvania, and that's great to see. And so, the Mercantile project was started by the Redevelopment Authority. I think that they deserve some credit for taking a risk on that building. Before them, Steve McGarvey had bought it from a former firefighter who let it just sit. Steve never got around to developing it, and the Redevelopment Authority came in and took it over and put 14 residential condominiums on the 4th and 5th floor, and the commercial space sat for a very, very long time. And there's a number of different folks that got involved in turning that thing around, including Fourth River out of Pittsburgh, who we helped bring into the market. And then when they got the 14 residential units done, Michelle Griffith, Griffith Properties, who owns Level Place, came in and further stabilized and got Key Bank and the post office going. And so really a lot of good folks have touched that, but really the culmination is what Jeremy Young and his partner Doug are doing at Federal Resources. That's a condominium building, so they were able to come in and buy their space inside of that building. And they're putting their corporate headquarters there.
That's
and
fantastic.
This is a company that does the majority of its work outside of Erie. And, these two guys, we're lucky to have them in this community because they not only acquired the building, but they're now putting a significant amount of money into putting their headquarters there. It's going to be a great addition to that part of town. It's going to bring a lot more life to the sidewalk, and just incredibly exciting. And congrats to Jeremy and Doug and their
Is that
team.
going to complete that building, or is there still space available?
To be determined.
Okay,
We're real close to having his space planning done.
Yeah.
There, they're absolutely taking the entire second floor. And this is
Okay.
really more Jeremy's story to tell, I suppose.
Right. Yeah. And we need to get Jeremy on the air
Jeremy
here. Yeah.
on the air. And the third floor, they may have some need for that space. And so a little too soon to tell what they're going to do with that third floor. But the rest of the building, yes, will be occupied.
So I want you to weigh in on something that I was leading into in the first hour is how do you determine when a building is, man, this is solid and it has good bones, we could do something with this, or, you know what, this thing needs to come down and come down yesterday?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm going to give sort of the official answer first. Obviously, if it's an old building and there's concern over the stability, that's not a gut feel kind of reaction. You need to bring in an engineering team that's going to confirm that the thing is actually stable from a structural standpoint. And, even then, you can find out that maybe it doesn't feel quite structurally sound now, and you go through a process and it can be saved. A prime example, across the street, one of our favorite topics when I'm visiting you, the EDDC and what they did with the old, Sherlock's Park place. The upper floors of that building were absolutely not structurally sound. Wow. The building itself was, but you could save that. Our little building on 10th Street, when we were going through the engineering, we ended up we had two choices: either put new structural steel in to support the second floor, or what we call sistering joists, so that we could, further stabilize. We wanted to keep the historic look, so we did that methodology. But so aside from that, maybe not obvious to everyone, but obvious to those of us in the business, the first thing is actually make sure that it's safe and stable.
Gotcha.
And that if it's not safe and stable, can you make it safe and stable?
Mm-hmm.
So that's sort of the formal answer. The informal answer is, I think you have to, look at what the best and highest use of the building is, and if whatever the use is going to be is going to, quote, pencil out the economics of real estate, whether it's, building a new residential neighborhood or renovating your own home. Mm-hmm. There's some math that needs to be done to determine. So, I'll use my little building as an example. When we decided to do that project, we really didn't do a lot of advanced work on it. We liked the building. We thought it'd be cool for our office. When we got into it, there were several areas that really, truly were not stable. Not only the second floor, where we had to put that structure in, but ultimately we had brickwork. The single most expensive thing we did in that building was restore all of the brick. It was a very large project. Took almost a year. And there were certain sections where we had to actually clamp the building back together. Well, okay, so I had to have done some math calculation on that to determine that it's worth spending that money. Mm-hmm. And we did. We went through the math and figured out that even with that expense, it made sense to save the building.
So, in your terms, when we talk about, because you taught us the whole concept of Class A, Class B, Class C office space, can you make a historic building like we're seeing at Mercantile or whatever into Class A office space?
Well, I think I've said a couple times before on the show, there's not a real standard for Class A, Class B, Class C. Technically, if you were to look at the most
just
common,
go to how much people are willing to pay on a per square foot basis?
If you Google it right now, what is the general definition of Class A office space? Yeah. It's typically a building that's newer than 10 years old. It's 4 stories or greater, and it's being used for a market rental use. So what we do is we sort of, those of us that do this all day, every day, and we're talking to brokers and developers from other parts of the country, in Erie, we might say, and some might find this, hard to swallow, but really there's only one Class A office building in downtown Erie, and it's Erie Insurance's new building.
The Hagen building.
Yeah, it's to that standard that we just talked about. However, if you look at 100 State, or the buildings over at the Bayfront and Cranberry, the Bellow Zone, those are sort of Erie Class A. They're at the highest end of our market. Then if you look at a place like Lovell Place or Mercantile, you might call those renovated Class A.
Okay.
Like you might, or adaptive reuse Class A. Like they're not hard and fast rules on what you call these things. But if a broker from, Pittsburgh calls me and says, what do you got that's Class A? And I say, well, we've got Erie Class A at 100 State or at Cranberry. We've got adaptive reuse Class A at 153 East 13th Street at Lovell Place. They'll kind of understand. Now, some of them, if you've only ever worked in New York, or if you've only ever worked in Chicago, or if you only ever worked in Austin, you might say, I don't know what you mean. That broker might say, what do you mean by that? And I'd say, well, we're a moderate sized city that's gone through some challenges with our manufacturing base, and therefore we haven't built brand new office buildings in downtown Erie in a long time.
But I would imagine if we talked to the building manager at the UPMC Tower, which was the former U.S. Steel Tower in downtown Pittsburgh, they're going to say, by golly, this is a Class A office space.
That's correct. You are correct.
So it is it's market relative, isn't it?
It's market relative. It's Pittsburgh Class A.
It's Pittsburgh Class A.
Yeah.
And who wouldn't want to be on the 52nd floor of the UPMC Tower in downtown Pittsburgh if you had the chance, right?
That's right.
We've got Chuck Peter with us here. Chuck Peters, he's going to be talking about the CRIZ, which is this city revitalization investment zone, and what it means to the commercial real estate market. Stay with us. Our guru is with us, and you can learn a lot right here on 105.9. Chuck Peters is our guest here from Altair Holdings. We're talking commercial real estate. All right, Chuck, we want to dive in on the CRIZ. This was big news when we finally heard that I think it's us and Reading maybe are the latest third class cities to get this CRIZ designation from the governor. I'm hearing up to $15 million of new investment available from our money staying close as opposed to getting dumped into the state coffers after a couple years now.
Yeah, first of all, congrats to Senator Laughlin, who stayed on this concept for a very, very long time, and it's an incredibly important tool for in particular folks in my world, in the real estate world. It's one of many important tools to help the economics of a project go. But first, congrats, to Senator Laughlin, along with Erie Insurance, who has stepped up in a big way, and the others in our legislative contingent that went to bat for our community getting to keep this money. It doesn't go unnoticed, the work and effort that went into this, because in short, and I'm certainly not an expert in CRIS. I'm sure you've talked to Attorney Wachter, young Attorney Wachter, Matt Wachter.
We need to get him
that.
back on, to talk it through. Right?
I love talking with him about it, and certainly there are people that are more expert than me. But what I will say is this. The concept is that there are certain taxes that would normally go to Harrisburg that we will now be able to keep a portion of, and that amounts to that $15 million, which will go to an authority of which Matt Wachter is the chair, and a lot of good folks that serve on that authority, our legislative contingent, the mayor, the Senator Laughlin. Tremendous job in picking some really solid folks to serve on that. The idea is that money can be utilized for transformative economic development projects, and with a particular focus, I suspect, on real estate.
Right.
I think that if you were to talk to, and again, I'm not the expert, talk to the board. I'll talk more generally about how it can be used, but the folks from the CRIS Authority, I think, are also looking at, possibly using it for equipment funding for different businesses. And so a lot of really good opportunity. But I think what's most interesting about it is that this is a 30-year commitment from the state that we can get up to this $15 million a year. Now, the CRIS Authority doesn't just get to decide exactly where that money goes. They're going to review projects. They're going to set up frameworks. They're going to, petition, in essence, 3 different agencies within Harrisburg, DCED, the Office of the Treasury, and I believe the Office of the Budget. I think those are the 3 that will ultimately get sign off on projects actually going forward. But what's really interesting is that, the economics of real estate, and we've talked about this ad nauseum on this program, the economics of new buildings, adaptive reuse, they're hard to make work in a community our size. It's not just Erie. It's not about Erie. I mean, I hear the naysayers, well, it's Erie. No, it's not just Erie. This is all over the Northeast, and something that affects way more than just our size city. It's smaller, it's bigger.
Yeah, let me just pause there for a second. Does it affect smallish cities, 100,000 population, in the hot areas, though? Does it affect an Asheville? Does it affect a Little Rock?
Yeah, no, not so much. I mean,
okay, so those are go-go markets.
Yeah, markets where the population is growing and real estate values are going to follow suit. It's certainly where population is going, there's less of a gap. That's not to say there is sometimes a gap even in those markets, but certainly less so than here, and Buffalo and Cleveland and Pittsburgh.
Right.
I mean, or else you wouldn't see the historic $600 million investment that downtown Pittsburgh needs to transform itself. Right.
I'm still trying to figure out why they're building another stadium over there. That's a whole other story, huh?
I guess I missed that. I'm not a big sports guy.
I guess they are. Like, they just built Brown Stadium,
Cleveland.
Cleveland.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Cleveland.
Yeah. That's right. I think they're going to have a dome on it. So
okay, is that
if any place needed a dome, it's Buffalo.
it's Buffalo, exactly.
They're just sinking that sucker down into the ground.
Right.
But as the CRIS goes, it is support for these projects to make up gaps in financing become important. And you've heard, and we've talked about a number of them. Historic tax credits are an example of that. Historic tax credits were used across the street at what used to be your brother's office,
Starbucks, and so on.
And Starbucks, there were historic tax credits. In that deal, there were historic tax credits at Level Place, and many, many other projects. That's one tool. It's a way to lessen the burden on the private developer to help get a project over the finish line. There's all kinds of these programs out there. Sometimes it's new markets tax credits, which have a much lower yield than, say, a historic tax credit. But new markets tax credits can be used in areas where there are certain I'll say poverty issues to an extent, but
kind of like the East Side
ECAT
Renaissance.
Well,
ECAT.
sure, but ECAT is the first example of a new markets tax credit deal in Erie, and that is an incredible transformation of a building.
Absolutely.
In a very highly productive use. There's private sector there, the United Way's there, the programs that ECAT has. Truly transformational to that neighborhood. Would not have happened if it had to rely solely on traditional private financing. So those new markets tax credits help that project.
Does something like the CRIZ or these other tax credits, does that ding us at all from getting grants from the DCED or RCAP or RACP type of grants, or do you still get your fair share of those too?
Well,
am I getting too much in the weeds?
No, not at all. First of all, you can't stack some of these programs.
You cannot.
So RACP, KIZ, KOZ, KOEZ can't be stacked on a CRIZ.
Okay.
So
you can't use a RAC like I'm thinking about. I think RACP money is going to the Renaissance building,
correct,
right?
Yeah. So the Renaissance project will have RACP funding. It's already been awarded that. If it also happens to be in a KIZ, so it would make it ineligible for a CRIZ unless the KIZ use goes away.
Right.
In which case the CRIZ could potentially be
so they could have
there.
both. Gotcha.
And they could have both, but it's sort of an order of operation issue.
Because I would think in the end we want grants more than loans or loan funds to fund some of these big, hitting for the fences types of projects.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you look at a large project, we have a project in another county here in Pennsylvania. It's a $30 million project. It's an adaptive reuse project that is a 5-story building, about 80,000 square feet, something like that. There are 26 different sources of funding into that project. Bank debt, some grants, things like historic tax credits, which, we could do a whole show on how historic tax credits work. That's historic tax credit is marketable, right? So the theoretically the developer doesn't need that tax break, so they sell that tax break to raise money to be able to do the project. So, yes, grants are great and they're important, but they are not the be all end all. I don't think it's fair, for developers to think that they should just get all of this for free. I mean, I think we need to have a compelling case that this is what we're doing and these are why we need these sources.
Chuck Peters is our guest from Altair, talking commercial real estate. And when we get back, we'll talk about what the next 12 months might look like. Talk Erie and the Joel Natale Show here. We are in the live from our Kingdom Financial Group studio in the middle of Erie's Renaissance here in downtown. Chuck Peters, the managing partner of Altair Real Estate Holdings, is with us here. And Chuck, when we talk about private investment in Erie, I don't think we've been at this position maybe in our lifetimes.
I don't think so. I mean, it's impressive to see. You got to give credit to some of the pioneers that were coming back to downtown when downtown was sort of bombed out, and there are names that we all know that took some risk here that I think sometimes it's easy to forget the risk that they took. The McGarvey family of Meadowbrook Dairy and Country Fair, they were instrumental when the first redevelopment at Modern Tool happened, and that project ended up in a bankruptcy, and they bought that and turned it into office and apartments, and obviously Lovell Place, the Comedy Club. They were early adopters. Tom Kennedy was a developer putting a lot of money in here when other developers were leaving, and those folks, candidly took it on the chin. I mean, it was a tough go of it, because some of these, we were in the last segment talking about economic development programs, and not all of those tools existed. Historic tax credits did, and they were utilized. But not all of the programs that exist now existed then, and it made it more difficult because the gap was even bigger back then. Now, I had a special guest. I don't name drop, but I'm gonna drop this name. Carolyn Newhouse was in town today, former deputy secretary in the Corbett administration, working for C. Allen Walker, and they were very involved in a lot of economic development efforts around the Commonwealth, and so Carolyn's been all over I tried to get her to join me, by the way.
Yeah,
no,
it would have been fun.
Out of here.
But that's fine.
But driving her around today and showing her the projects that have taken place that are largely private sector driven, it should be motivation to other cities our size throughout this part of the country and cities that are smaller. What was done, I know we all talk about the EDDC constantly, but if you look at that model after the 2016 Buki plan and Tim Nicastro and others saying, hey, we're going to do this. We're going to get the private sector motivated to come in and invest. There has been a massive amount of investment. I think some have it pegged at nearly $750 million.
Right.
And so that's a big number. And I think that I think smaller businesses have followed suit. I mean,
just a pause here. When we think back to Metro 100 2017, and I saw you there. At the Jefferson, the idea that Charles Buki was saying you need to invest $600 million, people were like, well, my head just exploded because there's no way we're going to get that kind of investment. We've gone beyond that. Some people even say it's $1 billion worth of investment, over $300 million just since the mayor has had his LRTA plan in the city.
Yeah.
I mean, money is being engaged.
Yeah, that's right. And so the stimulus of having some of these economic development programs available to help spur on that private development is important. And, not all of us utilize that. Not every project needs it. But I think that when you see that we talked about it in the context of Buffalo. When I first started working in Buffalo in 2007, and the Buffalo Niagara Medical Campus was kind of an idea, but it wasn't really going full steam ahead. Their local leadership, Tom Beecher and Matt Enstis and Pat Whalen and so many others in Buffalo said, you know what, we're going to get on the same page, and we're going to go to, the powers that be in Albany, and we're going to go arm in arm with our mayor, Masiello, and the county executive. And we're going to tell Albany that we need to be where that economic development money is spent. And they got the flywheel moving, and you could see it happen. They bought, 3 buildings at first, almost 1 million square feet. and started transforming that neighborhood into their innovation district. It can happen when everybody's singing off the same song sheet, when everybody understands how the programs work and are competitive in winning those programs, because all this stuff's competitive. The Criz will be competitive as well.
Sure.
15 million is a ton of money, right, every year. But we could easily absorb that whole 15 million. And so it's going to be competitive there. So they're going to need, projects that make sense, that it's not just, hey, this is a cool building we need to save, but here's this cool building, we'd like to save it, and this is the programming behind it. We're going to put a radio station on the first floor, and we're going to put a new subway next door, and a Rita's, and some apartments upstairs. And look, here's here's the spreadsheet, as Matt Wachter would say, like, someone needs to know how to do spreadsheets.
Right.
Like, here's how this is all going to work financially. Would you consider investing? And so, but once that flywheel gets moving, back to your original question, have we seen private investment like this before? No, we've seen great institutional investment for a long time. Erie Insurance has been investing here, since Captain Hagen, first took over. I mean, I think in the late 70s and 80s.
You have Hammett and St. Vincent's doing their things.
Yeah, absolutely. You've had that institutional, but
Gannon,
the private sector kind of jumping in is relatively new. And so all of that, effort to get the flywheel going, I sense that the flywheel is turning and that projects are moving forward.
It's kind of exciting to see the outside money coming in. You think about, Christian from California is the way I call him. What is different to me as an old timer is it doesn't seem like that people are begging and pleading for state money to make their projects go. That if it happens, it's gravy, but we've got the stacks going into it.
Yeah, it's maybe not quite gravy. It's an important gap filler.
Yeah.
You might be able to get
you go back to the juice
90%.
plant,
Yeah.
Where it's
that
totally...
that was not a real project.
No.
And that's the difference. I think economic development has evolved since sort of the old days of industrial development, speculative, build a building and they will come kind of concept.
Right.
I think it's, because they've taken some lumps, the system in general. And I'm not speaking of people here in Erie. I'm saying in general, economic development is needed to evolve. But yeah, no, certainly. I mean, to see a healthy mix of inside investment, locals that believe in their town, that's important. There's no doubt if Christian from California was sitting here next to me, he would say that the money that Michelle Griffith has invested in Lovell Place, or the money that Pete Zaffers has invested, or the money that Erie Insurance has invested, UPMC, the EDDC, you look at that as an outsider and you say, well, they must know something or they wouldn't be doing this.
Yeah.
And it does get outside money a little more excited. And Sean Fedorko, who I'm sure you've all spoken with from Radius, he talks about this as being a city that's not, it's not done yet. And, you go to a lot of markets and it's hard to break into them because the dollar amounts are so big. Erie's still a market where there are some opportunities to find a project and be able to put together the necessary capital to make that project work.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right where we see some folks, some expats coming back, and they come back with access to capital, and so they say, "Well, what do you think? You think that building's for sale over there? Because that's really cool looking, or what have you." Can we talk about what the next 12 months looks like? And I'm going to start, maybe this will be a rabbit trail, but we'll get back to it. There's some things that need to be torn down, I would think. I mean, I think, and this is just me and you can correct me, but when we still have the available imagery of a bombed out East 12th Street at the Bayfront Connector, that can't be helpful for real estate values. I don't know who owns it. I don't know what kind of circumstances are behind that plot of land, but it just can't be a helpful thing.
Yeah, I don't know who owns it either, and I drive by it almost every single day, and I think the same thing that everyone else does, that, boy, it doesn't look great. as someone who's passionate about old buildings and the urban fabric, I do look at it and think, what could that be? What, and I don't know the circumstances of that building either.
Right.
It may be completely economically productive with whatever few tenants are in there. I don't know. But when I look at that, I think of Ray's Indoor Mountain Bike Park in near Ohio City in Cleveland. And I think, man, wouldn't that be a cool attraction? It's big enough. And if it's not being used, is there a way to make that work? Mm-hmm. So my mind works a little different. I definitely don't like the D word.
Right.
But it's, even in downtown Pittsburgh, they're starting to use the D word.
They're starting to tear stuff down.
They're starting to talk about demolition.
Yeah.
And, it's not ideal because once you do tear it down, you don't have it back. There are absolutely buildings. There's been a lot of talk, and I know this is a sensitive topic for a lot of listeners. There's been a lot of talk about West 8th Street and the Presque Isle Gateway project. Yeah. And, those buildings were very much at end of life. Mm-hmm. As I know there's been debate and dispute over were they truly blighted by the definition? They were well on their way. Mm-hmm. What the Mill Creek Township General Authority did, I think, took a lot of guts. I mean, they want to follow through with their plan, which, the Embrace Mill Creek plan, also done by Charles Buki.
Right.
Also, like in Erie, said, look, you're the 13th largest municipality in Pennsylvania. You're going to start to have some things that need to be cleaned up and fixed. And, the current supervisors none of them were around when that plan was created. They're trying to do what so many electeds get, beat up for, which is, oh, you got this plan and then you didn't do anything with it.
Sure.
Well, they inherited a plan that was done. And they're, I certainly am not speaking for them, but watching and having been involved with the project, they're trying to do what that plan said, which is to take this very, very visible corner and make it more attractive. So you talk about East 12th. I don't know what the answer is on that one.
Right.
My understanding is that owner has not been interested in selling nor redeveloping. I don't know that. It's not nice to look at. It's not a great look for our community, but I'm not sure I'm not sure what the redevelopment plan would be if you did try to do something with it.
Right.
Where, contrast that to the west side and the West 8th Street project, the Presque Isle Gateway District. You can imagine that.
Absolutely.
If you close your eyes and imagine Uptown in Cleveland, mm-hmm. or you close your eyes and you imagine the Gulch in Nashville, or you close your eyes and you imagine Over the Rhine in Cincinnati, mm-hmm. you could see that there. You can see mixed use. You can see a higher and better use than what was there.
Or even, this is fancy, but Washington Street Mall in Cape May, it's a tourist district. We need assets for 4 million tourists a year, and people need to be able to do things and buy stuff, and that's, I think, what the Gateway. I mean, that's Mill Creek's unique burden and opportunity, is that you guys are the host to the peninsula, and so you have to be responsive for that.
Yeah, and so to answer the questions, sometimes buildings do need torn down.
Yeah,
I tend to look at poorly constructed from the beginning, stick built, low ceilings, those kinds of buildings, which is what the Bel Air was.
Sure was.
That did need torn down, or mm-hmm. it does need torn down, and it's soon.
What else?
Look at
what
the
else?
Brick one.
Yeah,
it's like, man, I wish we could save it.
Yeah, the grasshopper. Yeah. What else are we seeing that come Christmas time, 2025? That we're going to really see some stuff happening.
Well, I hope for one, I finally get that Christmas present under my tree from Santa Joel. I'm still waiting for this year's.
We'll make sure we take care of you.
Oh, there's a lot. I mean, I if we were to make real estate predictions.
Yeah.
I would say that, we got our CRIZ and Christmas 2025 will be a year since we got our CRIZ. And I have such confidence in that group of folks that are on that board. I think you're going to see some really interesting plans come forward. I think you're going to see a few key projects that we're all excited about. They're going to move to their next step. Kind of easy to predict some of these because some of them already have work going on. If you look at Ironworks Square, if you look at the Avalon, I would predict that you'll start to see some additional movement at 10th and State. I think you're going to see some movement at 8th and State. I think you're going to continue to see, projects going forward at the EDDC. The momentum's there, and folks are continuing to put forward effort and dollars into moving these projects forward.
Let's talk a little bit about, you mentioned about Buffalo all rowing in the same direction. And one of the unique things that, and when you're dealing with this space, it is private. There's a role for nonprofits, and there's a role for the public sector, whether it's authorities or actual elected officials. Who orchestrates that conversation so that we can all sing off the same hymn book? Yeah.
So, I think Infinite Erie is a great start. I think Infinite Erie working with the chamber is an excellent start. I think that what Tina Mangine at the Redevelopment Authority, the County Redevelopment Authority, working with Infinite Erie, working with the chamber, that's how those not-for-profits or authority-type organizations working together, along with the funders, like the Gaming Authority, what Perry's done in terms of really, truly creative and innovative grant-making opportunities, along with what the Community Foundation does.
Sure.
Absolutely critical. And then on the private sector, obviously our largest organizations, I see leaders from all of these large institutions at so many meetings that are trying to move the community forward. Everything from homelessness summits to redevelopment summits to how do we pool resources, events that the Jefferson holds. I think we're already kind of there. I think our electeds participate in those things. I think that we are more coordinated today than I've ever seen.
Okay.
And I think that, I remember when I first started getting involved with this stuff during the Rick and Rick administration, right after Dr. Judy Lynch left being county executive and Mayor Joyce Savacchio left. That was the Bosworth study. Anybody old enough to
I
remember the
that
Bosworth
one.
study,
Yep.
right?
Sure do.
And the Bosworth study said, hey, get a group together and we're going to call it the Civic Coordinating Committee or C-Cubed or whatever. And C-Cubed. And in that, I remember I was a very young guy getting invited to those meetings, and I remember sort of the I don't want to call it infighting because I don't want to create the wrong impression, but it was clear that people in the room were only looking at things through their lens.
A lot of siloing.
And I'm telling you, it's not that way anymore.
But see, I think we had to bottom out. We had to look kind of despair in the face. I mean, that 2020 census, scary.
Yeah. I think that I'm a private sector person. I'm going to give a little credit again to the private sector who sat and listened at the Metro 100 in 2017 or whatever it was after the 2016 Buki plan came out. And they really, the private sector took note and said, you know what, it's time for us to start helping. It wasn't like, hey, economic development people or nonprofit folks or, institutions, you're not doing it right. It was like, oh, wow, like this is an eye opener. We all have to work together. And that is what happened in Cincy. That is what happened in Buffalo. Two great examples of it. And, am really excited to be part of it, and it's fun to see some positive momentum. We're not out of the woods, and I don't want anyone to think that my head's so far into the clouds that I don't realize that there are still challenges. Every single time I'm here, I say we need to think about our population. We need to make sure that what we're doing is beneficial to all residents, because we can't just focus on one particular segment of our population. It won't work. If you look at these other growing and successful communities, they pay attention. In Buffalo, it was the Fruit Belt, a traditionally disinvested neighborhood.
Wow.
And, the folks at the medical campus brought in leadership from the Fruit Belt and didn't, not just paid them lip service, brought them in. And I think that when you look at the East Side Renaissance, what we're doing with the neighborhood groups, our West Bayfront East Side Task Force, we can't forget those as we talk about the big, cool, shiny projects. We have to be doing those with the goal of that rising tide's going to raise all ships.
Got to leave it there. I always enjoy these conversations, and again, I feel like maybe this is the most optimistic one yet, Chuck, because the things that we were only aspirational for 6 years ago are coming to fruition now.
Sure is. Thanks for everything you guys do, and thanks for having me.
Chuck Peters, the managing partner at Altair. We've got to go to news here. Stay with us. It's the Joel Natale Show on a Wednesday, moving forward on this very, very chilly day in downtown Erie.